I'm Jane Pauley, and this is Time and Again. American family life has changed since they were kids, and chances are good that the conversation will soon turn to Leave It to Beaver. From 1957 until 1963, and ever since in reruns.
There are television shows that entertain, and then there are television shows that become a part of the very fabric of American culture. Leave It to Beaver is firmly in the second category. When it first flickered onto screens in October of 1957, nobody could have predicted that a simple story about a suburban boy named Theodore Cleaver and his everyday misadventures would still be talked about, analyzed, and adored nearly 7 decades later. The Cleaver family felt like neighbors. Ward was the kind of father every kid wished they had. June was grace and warmth personified. Wally was the cool older brother, and Beaver, well, Beaver was every curious, well-meaning kid who ever stumbled into trouble without meaning to. But behind that perfectly manicured lawn and those Sunday dinner smiles, there was a far more complicated, surprising, and deeply human story unfolding. The cast had secrets. The producers had battles. The network made decisions that nearly erased the show from history entirely. And some of the most iconic details you remember about the series came from places you would never expect. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on all of it. These are 20 weird, wonderful, and little-known facts about Leave It to Beaver that will completely change the way you watch this classic show. Let us start with something that seems obvious in hindsight but was actually quite revolutionary for its time. When Leave It to Beaver began its run, Jerry Mathers, the boy who played Beaver, was only 9 years old. Tony Dow, who brought older brother Wally to life, was 12. What made the show genuinely unique was that the writers did not freeze the characters in time the way so many sitcoms did. Instead, they allowed Beaver and Wally to age naturally alongside the actors portraying them. Season by season, you could hear it in the crack of their voices, see it in how much taller they stood, and feel it in the way they began to think about girls, responsibilities, and the world beyond Mayfield. Audiences across America were watching their own children grow up in the Cleaver boys, and that quiet emotional connection became one of the show's most powerful and underappreciated qualities. Here is a fact that sounds absurd today but was absolutely scandalous in 1957. One of the very first episodes of Leave It to Beaver featured a scene involving a toilet, and that single piece of porcelain nearly destroyed the show before it had a chance to begin. The story involved Beaver and Wally secretly ordering a baby alligator through the mail, and when the little reptile became impossible to hide, the boys attempted to stash it in the toilet tank. To modern viewers, this is just a funny kid's adventure. To television censors in the 1950s, it was deeply offensive. Showing a bathroom on screen was considered indecent, and the mere suggestion that a toilet existed in the Cleaver home was thought to be unsuitable for family audiences. The producers fought hard to keep the scene, arguing that the toilet was simply a backdrop and that the real story was about boyhood mischief. Eventually, a compromise was reached. The episode aired, but the camera was strictly limited to showing only the top of the toilet tank. The bowl itself was never visible. Though it seems like a minor concession, the significance was enormous. Leave It to Beaver became one of the first American sitcoms to show a bathroom on screen at all, and that particular episode, originally intended to be the series premiere, was pushed back in the broadcast schedule because of the censorship dispute. A toilet changed television history. You genuinely cannot make that up. Generations of viewers have quietly wondered where on earth the name Beaver came from. It is an unusual name for a child, catchy enough to stick in the memory forever, and distinctly American in a way that is hard to explain. The answer traces back not to a writer's room brainstorm but to a real human being. Joe Connolly, one of the show's creators, served in the Merchant Marine during World War II. Among his fellow servicemen was a man whose nickname was Beaver. Nobody seems to have recorded how that particular sailor earned the nickname, but it stayed with Connolly long after the war ended and the ships came home. Years later, when Connolly was developing stories inspired by suburban family life, he reached back into his personal history and pulled out that old nickname. When the character of young Theodore Cleaver needed a name that felt instantly recognizable and slightly quirky, Beaver Cleaver simply clicked into place. It sounded right. It was easy for children to say, fun for adults to repeat, and perfectly suited to a boy whose greatest talent was finding himself in small, spectacular disasters. So the next time you hear someone say the name Beaver Cleaver, remember that somewhere out there, a real merchant sailor is the original inspiration for one of television's most famous nicknames. Television production in the early 1960s operated on famously tight budgets. Half-hour sitcoms were expected to be made quickly, cheaply, and efficiently. Against that backdrop, the news that one Leave It to Beaver episode reportedly cost around $40,000 to produce was genuinely shocking to those in the industry. The episode in question was the Season 4 installment titled In the Soup, which aired in 1961. To put that number in perspective, $40,000 at the time was roughly equivalent to 3 times the cost of an average American home. For a gentle family comedy about suburban life, it was an extraordinary investment. What made the story even more interesting was where the money actually went. There were no elaborate special effects, no guest stars demanding huge salaries, and no exotic filming locations. The budget went entirely into craft, into careful camera work, precise set construction, and meticulous editing designed to make every moment feel as vivid and real as possible. Some people in the industry thought it was extravagant. Others quietly recognized it as visionary. When the episode aired and audiences responded warmly, the gamble was vindicated. It stands today as an early example of a television production choosing quality over economy and being rewarded for the decision. Hugh Beaumont, the man who played the impossibly calm and wise Ward Cleaver, brought something to that role that no script could have manufactured. Before he ever set foot on a Hollywood soundstage, Beaumont had studied theology and been ordained as a licensed Methodist minister. His original plan had not been acting at all. He intended to dedicate his life to the church. Acting began as a practical way to support himself during his seminary studies, but the camera took a liking to him, and the ministry eventually shared space with a growing career in entertainment. Even after Leave It to Beaver made him a household face, Beaumont continued to preach at small churches away from the spotlight. He actively preferred that people think of him as a man of faith rather than as a television star. The patience, moral gravity, and quiet authority he brought to Ward Cleaver were not performances drawn from observation. They came from genuine conviction and a lifetime of sincere spiritual practice. It is a remarkable thought. The fictional father whose guidance helped shape the values of millions of American children was, in real life, a man who had literally committed himself to guiding others. Ward Cleaver's wisdom was not just written. It was lived. If you watched Leave It to Beaver during its early seasons, you almost certainly remember Larry Mondello. He was Beaver's round, lovable, endlessly entertaining best friend, the kind of kid who could stumble into chaos simply by showing up. Actor Rusty Stevens played him with a natural charm that made him one of the show's most beloved supporting characters. And then, somewhere around 1960, Larry Mondello simply vanished. No farewell episode. No explanation offered to the audience. No acknowledgement that one of Beaver's closest companions had disappeared from his life. The full truth behind his exit has never been definitively settled, and that ambiguity makes the story even more fascinating. Stevens himself later said that he simply wanted to step away from Hollywood and live like an ordinary child. The constant filming schedule had taken away too much of his childhood, and he wanted it back. However, Barbara Billingsley offered a different account over the years, suggesting that the producers had encountered persistent difficulties dealing with Stevens' mother, who was deeply involved in managing his career. Some reports from the period also indicated that the family relocated away from California, making continued filming logistically impossible. Whatever the true combination of reasons, the result was the same. One day Larry Mondello was there, and the next day he was simply gone. It remains one of the quiet mysteries tucked inside this famously wholesome show. Not every story from the set of Leave It to Beaver is warm or charming. Some carry real weight, and the experience of actress Jerry Weil, who played the sharp-tongued tattletale Judy Hensler, is one that deserves to be told honestly. Weil was around 12 years old when she was on the show, and as she grew naturally into adolescence, the people managing the production became concerned that her developing figure made her look too old for the character. Their solution was deeply troubling. The wardrobe and costume team wrapped her chest with tape and bandages before filming to flatten her appearance and make her look younger than she actually was. Weil later spoke publicly about the experience, describing it as humiliating and saying that it fundamentally changed her relationship with acting. The joy she had once felt in front of the camera was stripped away by that practice. After the series ended, she did not pursue another entertainment career. She became a real estate agent and left Hollywood entirely, stating that she had been pushed out of a profession she might otherwise have stayed in. Her story is a quiet but important reminder that child performers were not always protected the way they should have been, and that behind the laughter audiences enjoyed at home, some young actors were paying a price nobody knew about. June Cleaver's pearls are among the most iconic accessories in the entire history of American television. They became a symbol of a particular ideal of domestic femininity, endlessly referenced, parodied, and analyzed. But the actual reason those pearls appeared on screen every single episode has nothing to do with symbolism, fashion philosophy, or a costume designer's grand vision. It was entirely practical, and the decision came from Barbara Billingsley herself. Billingsley had a small natural hollow at the base of her throat, and under the harsh, unforgiving lights of a television studio, that hollow created an unflattering shadow on screen. To solve the problem simply and elegantly, she asked the wardrobe team to give June a string of white pearls, which filled in the shadow beautifully. Later in the show's run, as the actors playing her sons grew noticeably taller, Billingsley also requested that June be dressed in heels during scenes. This was not about vanity. She simply wanted to maintain the visual dynamic of a mother standing at a natural height relative to her rapidly growing boys. She reportedly joked that she was grateful nobody suggested putting her on a wooden box instead. Two of the most recognizable elements of one of television's most iconic characters exist entirely because of practical, sensible problem-solving by the woman who wore them. It is genuinely difficult to imagine a world in which Leave It to Beaver was forgotten after a single season, but that world very nearly existed. When the show premiered on CBS in the fall of 1957, the network gave it a chance but never fully believed in it. The ratings were modest, the tone was gentle, and the executives struggled to see why a quiet comedy about suburban family life deserved a long future. After one season, CBS made the decision to cancel it. For the vast majority of television series, that would have been the end of the story. What happened next was unusual enough to qualify as remarkable even by Hollywood standards. ABC, the competing network, saw something in the Cleaver family that CBS had overlooked and stepped in to pick up the series. Starting in 1958, Leave It to Beaver found a new home, a new audience, and a new sense of purpose. Over the following 5 seasons on ABC, the show grew from a modest family comedy into a genuine cultural institution. The family that one network discarded became the family that another network built its reputation on. It is a story about second chances and about the fact that the people holding the power do not always recognize what they have until someone else is smart enough to take it. Among the many recurring characters who populated the world of Leave It to Beaver, Beaver's school friend Gilbert Bates holds a particular place in television trivia history. Gilbert was played by a young actor named Stephen Talbot, and what most viewers never realized was that Stephen came from a genuine Hollywood family. His father, Lyle Talbot, was a veteran actor with decades of film and television experience who also appeared in Leave It to Beaver, though not as Gilbert's father. Lyle played a completely different character named Mr. Dennison, the father of Beaver's girlfriend Linda. So a real father and his real son worked on the same show, walked the same studio corridors, and probably shared countless quiet moments between takes, yet the two characters they played had no connection to each other whatsoever and never shared a scene. It is the kind of behind-the-scenes reality that sounds almost too neat to be true, but it happened. While Stephen was learning the rhythms of television acting for the first time, his father was nearby with decades of experience to draw on. 2 generations of one family, contributing simultaneously to a show about the importance of family. There is something quietly beautiful about that. Ken Osmond played Eddie Haskell with such convincing, slippery charm that the character essentially consumed his public identity. Eddie was the kid who complimented your mother extravagantly while plotting something underhanded the moment her back was turned. He was television's definitive two-faced teenager, and Osmond played him perfectly. The problem was that nobody in Hollywood could see past the performance. Casting directors looked at Osmond and saw Eddie Haskell. Producers heard his name and thought of the smirking schemer from Mayfield. The role that made him famous also made it nearly impossible for him to work again. Rather than grinding through endless unsuccessful auditions, Osmond made a decision that nobody saw coming. In 1970, he left acting behind, grew a mustache so people would stop recognizing him, and joined the Los Angeles Police Department. The actor who had spent years playing television's most infamous young troublemaker spent the next decade protecting the citizens of Los Angeles. His time on the force was not without serious danger. During one incident involving a pursuit, Osmond was shot 3 times and survived only because he was wearing a bulletproof vest. The man who once lurked in the Cleavers' living room making mischief had become, by any measure, a genuine hero. It is one of the more extraordinary second acts in American entertainment history. In 1958, television was not a particularly diverse landscape. The families on screen were overwhelmingly white, the communities they inhabited were almost uniformly Anglo-American, and the idea of a mainstream sitcom deliberately introducing a Hispanic character as a meaningful, dignified presence was genuinely unusual. Leave It to Beaver did exactly that in an episode called Beaver and Chewy, in which Beaver befriends a new classmate named Chewy Varela, a boy from a Spanish-speaking background who does not yet speak English. The episode's central theme was empathy and the human capacity for connection across language and cultural barriers. Beaver works patiently to help Chewy feel welcome, teaching him English words and defending him against the casual unkindness of peers who do not understand difference. For a family sitcom in the late 1950s, this was quietly progressive storytelling. It did not make grand speeches or lecture its audience. It simply showed a decent boy treating another boy with kindness and curiosity, and in doing so, it planted a small but meaningful seed of cross-cultural understanding in millions of American living rooms. Small moments like that one quietly shaped how a generation thought about people who were different from themselves. Some actors finish a long-running role and spend the rest of their careers desperately trying to escape it. Barbara Billingsley took the opposite approach with June Cleaver. When Leave It to Beaver ended its original run, Billingsley did not put June away. She carried the character forward with genuine affection, revisiting her across decades and across a remarkable variety of productions. June appeared on The Love Boat. She turned up in the new Leave It to Beaver, a revival series that brought the cast back together. She made appearances in other programs that allowed Billingsley to bring that familiar warmth and grace back to the screen.